So thank you very much for all your coming, and also I'd like to introduce the panelists simply because I had a hard time convincing all of them to come to G1 Global, and especially Nick Garvin, who is the top anchor person and the best moderator I've ever seen on Davos and all the global conferences. Nick, thank you for coming. Nick Garvin, the moderator. Nick will be moderating the session of this one and also the last one. So the keynote panelists, all the session will be moderated by Nick. The purpose of this is to make it more like an intimate, and you should be engaging. So I hope you'll be raising questions and make comments. And then I'd like to introduce Heizo Takenaka-san. Takenaka Heizo-san. He is, I admire his like a strength and also his wisdom, and thank you for coming, and I hope you will be able to contribute in terms of where Japan should be heading. Thank you for Takenaka-san. And then Mr. Yoriko Kawaguchi, who is a former foreign minister, and she has been on the diet, and before that she was working for Ministry of METI, Ministry of Economic and Industry and Technology. And thank you for coming. She is also a constant goer to Davos, and she knows what's going on in the world, and also she has some wisdom to share with us in terms of Japan. Thank you very much for coming. And then last panelist, who is also a very impressive panelist, who is Keiro Kitagami. And he is a member of the DPJ, and his English is fluent, so he'll be able to explain to you what's going on. And he's also on the DPJ, which is on the government side, so he'll be able to assume what Minister Furukawa said, and then he'll be the one to be taking any kind of challenges from Nick. So thank you for coming. Without further ado, I'd like to pass it on to Nick.
Good morning. Excuse me. Good morning, everybody. I arrived very late last night from London, and it's dangerous being on a plane now for 9 or 10 hours. You're never quite sure what might happen around the world, whether in Japan or elsewhere. Mr. Papandreou is still in power in Greece, and I say that because here are we trying to think of structural ways ahead for your country, and I've been asked to come here halfway around the world. But I'm very struck, and I was on air for the BBC literally on Tuesday evening, and I ran to the plane to get here, that things are so unpredictable at the moment. The impact of the referendum announcement and the agreement by the Greek cabinet has really stunned everyone in Europe, and I'm sure in the markets here, although they're closed here on your public holiday. And I say that because listening to the minister a few minutes ago, I'm struck by the real question that there are great ambitions for your country, particularly after 3/11, but there are so many uncertainties in the whole global environment in which you are now trying to reformat your country. I feel very humble and proud to be here to help you on that way, and my job really is to help stimulate, and I've been asked to come here to help stimulate a conversation for the next hour and then later this afternoon. And it is a spirit of conversation, I think, which is needed here. And I have encouraged you to fill in these bits of paper, not on a tweet or on an email, but actually on a piece of paper. We all still remember a piece of paper. Merely because it's a way of me being able to work out the kind of things which are on your mind, which I can put to the panel. And I can somehow make it come together in a more logical way rather than saying who has something else to say. So keep the questions coming. I will ask you if you want to ask the question in person, but it allows me to work out the kind of things that are on your mind, particularly after what we've heard from the minister, both in terms of the ambitions before 3/11, and now the even greater challenges of trying to remodel, rebuild, and also, obviously, the post-3/11 restructuring that has to confront your nation. But I have to say to you, I'm here in a personal capacity. I'm not representing the BBC. But you need to be aware that in Europe, there's a feeling that something of a restructuring is now underway. We've had our own, and I don't like to cheapen what has happened here, but I think we're going through something similar to you in terms of the awareness of a fundamental reassessment of what Europe's about. It is a sort of 311 without the terrible human consequences. There is that desperate feeling in Europe at the moment, particularly after what happened 2 days ago with the Greek decision, which has now created the most enormous uncertainty. If there is a referendum, unless the government falls, will Greece stay part of the Eurozone? But that's going to have a fundamental effect on economic prosperity and economic liquidity. And I think that has to underpin your assessments here from the panelists. Now, I've spoken for 3 or 4 minutes, and I want to hear now from the other panelists. While they're speaking, I'm going to work out from the bits of paper what other areas you'd like to cover. But I do urge you, all 3 speakers, there's a clear mood and there's a clear willingness and an awareness of what has to be done. But what are the ambitions? But what is achievable in this current environment? And I have to push you on that. What is achievable? We can have ambitions, but what can be actually realized? Let me go to Kitagami-san first.
Good morning, everybody. I'm Keiro Kitagami. I'm the DPJ member, and I'm also the Vice Minister for the Ministry of Economic Trade and Industry now. And hopefully for a long time, looking at the Japanese political landscape, you never know when you're going to lose your job. So I hope to remain for a while, at least in order to do some work. And listening to the minister speech, I agree that the 3/11 incident is not only poses a challenge for us as a Japanese politician, not just for reconstructing, but as a rebirth. And he mentioned a few things, one of which is that Japan should strive to become model for other nations or for the global community in terms of environmental issues and also the aging society. And that's an important issue, and I'll make a few comments on that. But I would like to stress that Japan, before becoming a model for other nations, it should look out for itself, because we're in very I think a critical situation in terms of the economy and also national security and other issues. So this is something that the Japanese people have to really keep in mind. I think the Japanese people are prone to think about global altruistic issues, but I think we should strongly stress the national interest issue. And if you ignore this basic aspect, I don't think you can become a model for other nations. So that's the second point that I'd like to stress. I know you're supposed to give 3 points, but I'm just going to give you 2, and you can fill the rest. The first issue, model for future. The minister talked about energy environment. The environmental issue is very important because reduction of CO2, the global warming issue, of course we have to deal with this, but it has to be an economically viable one. And I think some of the arguments in the global community, it completely ignores the economic issue. It should be, we should prosper economically and reduce CO2. And I think Japan can do this because, as Mr. Furukawa said, it has the technology. I think the key lies in technological innovation. Nick told us to be practical, so I will give you some practical examples. Ironically, nuclear issues. Despite Fukushima, the nuclear renaissance is not going to stop. Other countries are still going to create at least, from what I hear, 1,000 nuclear reactors all around the world. Is this wise or not? That's another question. But this is reality. And if we are going to do this, if the world is going to continue to do this, I think it should be made with a safe technology. And Japan, despite, I think the Fukushima crisis is more of a crisis management problem than a technological one. And the safety technology in Japan is still world-class. I think we have still more to offer to the world in terms of nuclear technology. That's one point. The second point, especially in the Asian countries, East Asia is going to be the greatest consumer for energy supplies. I think, but still China, India, these rely more on coal-fueled power. And coal is, as you know, the most dirty of all the energy. And I think Japan, with the ultra supercritical technology, also the combined, it's called the coal combined combustion energy. We have achieved an energy efficiency in terms of coal, with regard to coal, of up to 48% or 50%, which is again world class. And just to give you an example, if we implement these technologies in the United States, which is a strong user of coal, China and India all together, and we replace these old coal facilities with the super ultra critical, then we can reduce CO2 of up to the same level as reducing all of the CO2 emissions in Japan. So this is just an example of what technology can actually achieve. Aging society. I think again, the key issue is technology. There are many small to medium Japanese companies that have pharmaceutical technology which has not yet been tapped into. Say, let's give an example of syringe needles, which is very thin, that does not cause any sensation of pain. These kind of pharmaceutical technology that Japanese companies have, I think, should be more utilized. And in order to do this, we need to deregulate the Japanese medical industry for these companies to thrive and become more economical. So these are issues that that I want to rebolster the argument that Mr. Furukawa said, that Japan does have a lot to offer to aging society and also to the problem of balancing environmental issues with economic viability. The second point, looking at, I should be more succinct, okay. Okay, I'll just be very brief. Economy, I think, 311 it's just a realization of what was potentially the vulnerability of Japanese economy. I think this should be a wake-up call. I think there's a lot to do. We should reduce corporate tax rates, enter the TPP negotiations, clear the energy problem that we have, because utility prices is going to be very high if we get rid of all the nuclear capabilities in Japan. So I think these are issues that are absolutely practicable, and we should continue to do. Second, and I'll be very brief, in order to do these reforms, I think the basic problem, the most important problem that we have is political management. I joked about being laid off in a few months. This has been a problem of Japanese politics. I think it's not just a problem of leadership characteristics. I think it's the whole system itself. I can go into details if you have any questions. It has to do with the political party systems, apparatus, management skills, and also, and I'll be blunt, I think the Japanese people have to realize that democracy entails responsibility in the people, and that responsibility entails supporting the government, not just criticizing it through the media. And these are important issues that we have to deal with. Thank you very much.
Thank you. I've got already 40 questions, so we've got 45 minutes, so you can work out the economics and mathematics here. So let me ask a lot of these questions, because a lot of them are very important on a whole range of issues. And I have to say, if I may, before we go to the other two panelists, there are already several questions. What steps can the Japanese government take to show they are serious about implementing the steps outlined? And that's reflected in 3 or 4 questions. Can you actually achieve anything? Kitagami-san, can you just give me 1 minute on that? The realization, the minister has left, but the realization of the enormity and what you've just talked about, the political impatience.
Well, I'm just a vice minister, but I'll try to give you my
you represent the party in power.
That's right. Well, again, it's a problem of political management. We have an upper house that's completely controlled by the opposition party. This is a very difficult situation. In Great Britain, I'm aware that once most bills and budgets that are passed in the lower diet are almost automatically passed in the upper. Japan does not have that. It's actually stipulated in the constitution that the upper house has this prerogative. So
But the question is,
this
to
is-
demonstrate that you are serious about implementing this.
well, I think the first example we have to, the first challenge is going to be the TPP issue, which will be next week, and Mr. Noda will make probably a pronouncement on this TPP issue
Plenty
and
of
why it
questions
is
about
important.
that, yes.
And if he does not decide, I think the skeptics will be right that the government does not have any willpower to go through with these reforms. But if he does, this is a very contentious issue, and if he does, I think that would show that at least the party in power has the willpower and the decision making to go through with these reforms.
All of you bear in mind there's a tone through all these questions about impatience and can it be delivered. Madam Kawaguchi, your response to the Minister, please.
I think there is a consensus in this country that the direction that he described is the way that we should be going. That idea has been floated for the past 5-6 years. DPJ is saying it now, but LDP, my party, we have said it even before they did when we were in power. So there is no question about the direction. So what Nick is asking about what is achievable is a very pertinent question that we should be asking ourselves. My answer to that is that we will be able to achieve it if and only if we can change certain things. And of course, the first thing I would like to say, being a loyal LDP member, is change the government. But basically, I think Japan is a very strong country. Economically, it's still viable. Society is very strong. Society is very cohesive. It's a very good country, nice to live in. So we say that Japan's society and industry, they are doing well. But what is not doing well is the government. Leadership. And when I say leadership, I'm not saying that, DPJ has lots of problems, but LDP also has problems. I have to recognize that. We need a strong leadership that could risk their very existence at some time. They should be prioritizing the issues that had been delineated, and there are many issues that we will have to tackle with. So putting a priority is very important. One thing I would like to change, I would like to see the DPJ change, is the way that they manage their work. They ignore the laws completely. For instance, when the 311 took place, now we have a law which says that Chuo Bosai Kaigi in Japanese, Central Disaster Prevention meeting or something translated, should be convened, and that was never convened, and that is a very good forum to get everyone associated with this prevention or controlling the disaster and decide what should be done. That was never convened. So, and I don't have the time, so I don't do it, but just about everything, including this National Strategy Council, which Furukawa-san resides, that is not based on the law, and I don't know how they are going to collect the necessary information from government sources and other sources. So what I would like to see is that the DPJ government do things according to the laws that have been in place. And of course, they can bring in new laws if that is necessary. Why are we not having a strong leadership? That is a question raised by Kitagami-san also. I think mass media is a problem, and also education is a problem. People, we are taught from their child days, people are equal, which is right. But we are not giving education to the children up to bring up leaders who need to sacrifice themselves and also lead in case of urgent events like this. And another problem is that the whole country lack in the sense of urgency, and that is a problem. So I feel that it's not a quick solution, but change of leadership across the party lines, and also the prioritizing the issues and get done. We said, LDP said that we would cooperate in passing the laws. They are talking about the details of the laws related to the disaster resolution. They are now talking about the third supplementary budget. And the issue is that when we float bonds, now the DPJ government is saying that the duration is only 10 years. And we are saying that if you are floating bonds, it has to be 60 years or so. It should be much longer than 10 years. So the details, the devils lie in details, but I hope that DPJ government will think logically, and someone is smiling, but think logically, prioritizing, and just get things done.
Thank you very much indeed. I think we understand there are plenty of problems. What I want to do in the next 40 minutes is begin to look for solutions and clarity of what lies over the horizon. Hori-san, I'm going to ask a question of all those gathered here, particularly the next generation who are part of your school here. How many of you want to go into politics? How many of you want to become political leaders in this current environment? I see one hand go up. Only one. I assume all the rest of you do not want to go into politics, and that's an important indicator of where the future may lie, because Mr. Takanaka, after all, you were in politics, you're now in the university, and you've opted not to be in politics, but therefore you come having helped to restructure the banks and looked at the enormous economic challenges when you were in government, and I remember meeting you when you were in government, particularly with the postal services. Look at the challenges now, and listen to what we've heard from the two political figures here, and make your assessment as well as on what the minister has said about the politics in this country and whether a new model and a new framework can be established in the current political environment.
Well, thank you very much for this opportunity. First of all, I'd like to say, I hate politics.
You clearly have a lot of friends here.
But politics is needed, necessary. In this respect, I respect a lot the politicians who take risks. So, for example, Minister Furukawa made a great speech. I completely agree with his opinion regarding the direction of policy, as I mentioned by Minister Kawaguchi. First of all, I'd like to say, Chairman asked, what is achievable? I'd like to say many things are achievable. Many things are achievable. I'd like to raise two reasons. First one is, Japanese economy is still very strong. In 2008, September 2008, we had a so-called Lehman shock. And 4 years before Lehman, for 4 years before Lehman shock, the growth rate of the Japanese economy was about 2.5%. This is almost equal to that of the United States. And the increase of the growth of stock prices was much higher than that of the United States. During this period for 4 years, our employment increased by a million. So this is indicating if the government policy is appropriate, the Japanese economy can show still very strong performance. The regret is the momentum of the reform declined a lot in the past 4 years or so. So we need strong leadership and also stronger with the momentum for the reform. This is first thing. And the second reason why many things can be achieved will be, well, now we have, in a sense, chance. The keyword will be from scratch. From scratch will be the keyword. Also, this was mentioned by Minister Furukawa. Fortunately or unfortunately, everything was destroyed in the Tohoku area. So we can create completely new system in that area from scratch. So this can be the very important showcase to the world regarding the future models of society and the economy. So in this regard, I say also many can be achievable. At the same time also, I'd like to stress our technology is still very strong. Also regarding the earthquake, just 3 minutes after the massive quake, the alarm for tsunami was dispatched to all towns and villages. That's amazing. They also, at that time, 27 bullet trains were traveling in that area. But amazingly, all these bullet trains stopped before earthquake reached. This is a very special emerging, let's say, shutdown system they have. But anyway, so many things can be achieved. However, we need some conditions. The chairman also asked us how we can realize that, how to realize. The process is very important. First of all, still, as was mentioned by Minister Furukawa, the council, policy board named the Council on National Strategy will be very important. In LDP, we had the Council on Economic and Fiscal Policy. I was in charge of steering that committee. Once the DPJ government destroyed this system, and now they are going to create a little bit similar system. If I say similar, he'll be against of that. But anyway, but this kind of policy body is very important. Important point is this policy body is very special in the sense that this is directly chaired by Prime Minister. The chairman is Prime Minister. This is quite important. And if the Mr. Prime Minister Noda make use of this council, well, many things can be achieved. And also, at the same time, some strategic agenda is needed. Many things should be done, can be done. However, it's quite difficult to implement at the same time. This is a prioritization problem. So what will be the strategic agenda? I recommend to the government, well, first of all, let's stop deflation. Deflation is still the source of all economic diseases. Stop deflation. In this regard, the role of central bank is very important. And at the same time, deregulation and corporate tax decrease, corporate tax cut will be another important issue. TPP is, of course, very important, but in my view, TPP issue is not so difficult. Now they are discussing whether they are going to join the negotiation of TPP. It's understandable if they are discussing whether they are going to join TPP, but they are discussing going to join the negotiation of TPP. It's easy. Join the negotiation. That's it. That's it. So anyway, DPJ government still has a very great opportunity since you can create everything from scratch. Thank you.
Takanaka-san, I have to put to you, you say the country needs a new strategic agenda. Did the minister not lay one out for you about half an hour ago of strategically how the country can go forward? Was that not adequate enough?
Strategic agenda should be much more concrete, much more specific. Like, for example, under Koizumi administration, he proposed the privatization of Japan Post. This is because Japan Post was the biggest, largest public enterprises. So this kind of very specific issue or symbolized issue is needed. So in this regard, corporate tax cut or stopping deflation, something like would be the one possible candidate.
Because he used the words, we must squarely confront the crisis unflinchingly. Did you not see that kind of language from him and from the policies that he outlined? Please do.
There is the intention is good, but when it comes to management, that is a problem. I talked about that council not based on a law. It was just created by the Prime Minister without any legal foundation, whereas the council that Mr. Takenaka described is based on the law. That's with the ability to collect information from industry, from the government bureaucracy. So, and also the coverage of the council, if we compare the two, the new National Strategic Council, which Furukawa-san resides, does not cover the basic budget issues. It's just looking at a long time horizon, longer years ahead, and without really grips to what to change at this moment. So in my mind, it's no comparison, no power to really change reality. Thank you.
I think it's time for me to make a retort. The National Security Council, it may not be founded on law or whatever, but I see no difference. As a former bureaucrat working in the finance ministry, working under Prime Minister Obuchi and Hashimoto, I don't see any problems of that council gathering information from the ministries, because as a civil servant, you don't say, "Hey, this council is not founded on law, so I'm not going to give information. This one's founded on law, so I have to." That's completely out of the question. It's an impracticable criticism, and also concerning it's a good idea. I have no problems with being compared to the LDP schemes, because this is something that is necessary for the country, and we have to go through with it. And my main problem is that my skepticism right now is that I don't think any ministries or any politician has any clear idea on macroeconomic policy concerning this National Security Council. So I am asking the Ministry of Economic Trade and Industry to come up with some idea. Strategy Council. And right now, I think they're more focused on reconstruction in the East Japan, which is a very important issue. But in order for us to achieve reconstruction in the East Japan, we need a strong, vibrant economy. And right now, I don't think we don't have any focused ideas on that. And so that is something that we have to work on.
I now have a different microphone. I've got an enormous number of questions, and what I'd like to do is encourage you to give as brief answers as possible so I can get through as many of these. Many of them duplicate each other, and I apologize if I don't read out all your names, but this is a more efficient way of moving things forward. But Seiji Yasubuchi, looks like the government is doing so many things at the same time at the moment. How would you comment on their prioritization and resource allocation? Kazuko Yonikawa Talaga, I can't read the surname there. The raison d'etre of the government is to set priorities. Mr. Furukawa said thousands of issues, and we still don't see clear priority. He said even he doesn't leave none behind. Now, what I'm getting at here is this problem in a major crisis with a multitude of portfolios, with so many challenges. How does any political class do this? I remember hearing Tony Blair running his Africa governance initiative just a couple of weeks ago saying, I give guidance to the African leaders, only set 3 to 5 targets, then the public will see you've delivered them, as opposed to 150 major problems. What about this as a very political reality? Mr. Takenaka, as you don't want to be a politician anymore, what recommendation would you give?
Well, they have been discussing the role of the Council of National Strategy. The role of this council is very important. If this council create a kind of policy paper prioritizing the issues, this must be one answer. In that sense, so-called bony framework of the policies, the Honebuto type of recommendation or policy is needed. So this is one solution. At the same time, the role of Prime Minister is very important. Yes, Prime Minister, I really hope Prime Minister could say something much more concrete. His style is like that maybe. People have some kind of expectation, and reality is a little bit lower. So this gap becomes the complaint of the people. And the former Prime Minister Kan and Prime Minister Hatoyama raised very high expectations. For example, as far as U.S. base is concerned, this should be moved to outside Okinawa, etc., etc. And reality was very good, very low. On the contrary, our current Prime Minister Noda reduced these expectations. Right? Please do not expect too much of me, etc., etc. And so the gap is quite small. So the supporting ratio is not relatively high. However, important point is this expectation is automatically realized. You understand maybe? If growth rate expectation is very low, people consume low, invest low, and low expectation, low growth rate is realized. So I really hope the Prime Minister raised very high expectations, something, the target. In this regard, Kitagawa-san, I really recommend you to say something concrete to Prime Minister, to say, so that they speak much more concrete and ambitious plan.
Is that a pragmatic recommendation?
I think so. I mean, prioritization is very important, and that's what we're trying to do with the National Strategy Council, and TPP will be the first issue. And I agree with Mr. Takenaka that, why are we debating so much on entering into negotiations? But the Japanese, I mean, they, whether it's, beef or the oil crisis, they are very, very much, careful about entering into new stages. So that's one thing. And another thing, I think it's good that the Prime Minister has lowered expectations. And it's not just the Prime Minister himself. I think it's the public looking at the performance of the other two Prime Ministers. And it's a natural decrease in the expectation. And it's good. Because we don't want this euphemism, this revolutionary euphemism. I think we should go back to business, and in order to implement policies, you need to stabilize the party itself, of course, and he's doing that right now. But that is, again, prioritization is very important. He should show leadership with the TPP issue. If he does not do that next week, then I think the skeptics will be right.
Because what we're talking about here is how to get a rebirth of Japan with a new political landscape. Are you talking about a new political pragmatism, all three of you? Well, on the basis of what you've said, with the aims of the priorities and so on, I'm asking you to define it. I'm asking you to be clear about what we're talking about as we're looking for a new model, or as Japan is looking for a new model.
What I am looking for is for the government to, of course, have the priorities, and based on the priorities, announce the strategy to get there. When you talk about TPP, I am also involved heavily within LDP on the discussion of whether to join the negotiations of TPP. But what we need to show to the people is that we do, with right set of policies, we can create a good, strong agriculture industry or agriculture sector in Japan, and that's doable. And with that, we will join the TPP, get all the fruits of free trade. And that is the strategy, for example, I would like the government to show. And to show it and to explain to the people. And when the discussion is going on, no strategy is coming. It's just whether or not to join the negotiations. And that's not what the government should be doing. The government should be doing much more than that. So strategy on the basis of the priority. I mean, it's the management, and it's what is needed.
Well, let's talk about TPP now, because there are several questions here, but your view of how much this is a litmus test next week, Mr. Takenaka.
Well, as I mentioned, Prime Minister Noda will make a decision so that they can join the negotiation. This is not very difficult decision making, as I mentioned. But you also raised what will be a kind of country identity. What kind of country?
Let's move on to that in a moment, yeah.
Okay, at TPP, Japan should become, in a sense, the gateway state. Gateway for the commodity, gateway for information, gateway for human resource, etc., etc. So for that purpose, we should become much more open country. So in that sense, TPP is a kind of symbol. TPP, it can be a good agenda for this open new Japan.
Again, TPP is logically not a big decision. I agree, but politics is not always logical, and you have very robust arguments against this, not just in the DPJ. LDP, I think, will probably vote. They'll vote against going into negotiations. So it's not an easy problem. And second, I think it's a symbolic one and a very important one.
Kitagami-san, then could you explain why Korea could make that kind of policy? Korea also had a lot of discussion.
Probably because they suffer from the Asian crisis in 1987.
Yes. They had crisis, and based upon their experience, the president took a strong leadership.
Yes, and the presidential system is very, very different from the Japanese parliamentary system. And I want to say, and I'm not just giving excuses. I want to be very clear here that the prime minister will make a decision. And the TPP will be a very symbolic one because this is opening up to bold horizons overseas. And I think the main problem why we cannot get strong political leadership is because we cannot get strong political support, is because we are such an insular society, and we don't have any sense of competition with other countries. We don't have a sense of dependency on other countries, and TPP will definitely foster this. And this kind of sense of crisis is very important for stronger leadership and a need, the perception for the need of strong leadership, which is, I think, the basic assumption for what we're talking about.
In this regard also, I'd like to recommend the process of discussion should be disclosed. Well, this is another important role of the Council on National Strategy. And the Council on Economic and Fiscal Policy discussion was, the content was disclosed 3 days after the meeting. So reading that process, the people understand how necessary, how not necessary these policies are. So that's one way to persuade the people. I understand how difficult the politics is.
I don't really want to show the process to the people because it's a very dirty one. But I think the Prime Minister...
Remember, you're on the record here.
Yes. It is disclosed. It is disclosed.
But using the word, it's a dirty one, that's a dangerous thing to say in politics. With social media. It's probably out there already as a tweet, even on a national holiday.
No, I don't think he's right in saying that it's not disclosed. The discussion, as far as I know, at DPJ party, that is disclosed. Within LDP, we have every day from 8, we have discussions for maybe about 2 hours or so. That is disclosed to the press. So it's all disclosed. But the problem, as I said, is that the government needs to have a positive strategy about agricultural sector. Our agriculture sector is probably the 4th or 5th largest in the world in terms of production value. Not too many people know this, but we have a very large agricultural sector, and it's strong. And also say that agriculture is very important. Regions. In some regions, they live on agriculture. In the remote island of Okinawa, they bring up satokibi, which is sugarcane. And the fact that they are living on the remotest island off the coast of Okinawa is very important for our security, national security. So that has to be maintained, that has to be strengthened. And there is a way. So the government, just not discussing yes or no, announce the strategy so that we could do both. That's what the government should be doing.
Let me go through a number of other questions as quickly as we can, because we have 15, 20 minutes to run, and there's a lot to get through. A comment here from Michael Truon, I hope I pronounced correctly. Japanese people are simply not hungry, unlike the Indians and Chinese, when it comes to understanding the scale of the problem. Japan is a very nice country to live in, and that is meaning that really it's going to be very difficult to tackle many of these problems because people ultimately are feeling relatively comfortable. Is that an obstacle to changing the political landscape, Mr. Kitagami?
That was exactly my point in saying that I think one of the fundamental problems is that the Japanese people do not want reform. They say they do. They say they want strong leadership, but once you see one, they say he's a dictator. So I'm not really sure. And I think it's not just a problem of being hungry. It's a problem of being aware that Japan is definitely not in a very, in the next 5 or 10 years, I think our current account deficit is going to be in the red. The so-called competitive technology that we have is being overrun by the Koreans and the Chinese. And if you look at these issues and their implications on our living standards, then I think the Japanese people should definitely be more hungry and aware. And I think TPP is one milestone in opening up the country in that sense.
I disagree. The Japanese people are reform-minded. If you look at, I was in the private sector for some years. If you look at them, they search for reform, innovation. It's just that our society has many diversified interests, and no one is really leading what reform should be done before others. So that's prioritizing and also strategy. That's what's lacking.
I'd like to take the third way, maybe. Well, honestly speaking, Japanese society is very comfortable, too comfortable to change. This kind of feeling is held by the people, especially the younger generation, I think. But why it's so comfortable? One reason might be, of course, we have still very stable and robust economy. But another reason will be, well, there are two kinds of policies, government policies. One is policy to help, another one is policy to solve. The government is now taking mostly policy to help. Please consider the case of the rate of unemployment. The rate is very low, 4-5%, but this is supported by huge grant to the companies, 雇用調整給付金. So on the surface, this society is very comfortable, but this is not sustainable. That will be another important point. And sooner or later, because people will have a kind of some sense of risk, at the same time, they strong need a reform. Basically, Japanese people have a mind of reform, I think.
Let me pick up on a couple of points which build on what you've just said from Takashi Mitachi, how to hit the right balance between deficit reduction and fostering growth in this new political landscape, mentioning 3 metrics particularly: time frame, milestones, and key metrics, which are necessary to manage the sensitive balancing of the issue of deficit reduction and fostering growth. And building on that, the issue of how to fund for growth from Hiroaki Kawamura. We can't rely on debt or tax anymore. How do we fund money for growth in this new environment? All of you. Mr. Kitagami.
This is a very difficult question, but I agree that you have to balance the two. Fiscal, we need fiscal balance, of course, but the way the Ministry of Finance goes about it by just raising taxes and cutting down spending is not a very strategic and productive one. So we need some kind of a strategy for economic growth. My one thing that I would say is, at least get out of this deflationary spiral that we are in. And before we do, I don't think the government should overtax or cut down on spending. I think we should keep a certain amount of fiscal spending, and in terms of fiscal spending, I think we should allocate these resources to more productive ones, such as research and development with Japan. basically relies too much on the private sector. I think the public sector should spend more on research and development, education, and these areas are, I think, very productive resources that the government could do much on. So we should cut down more on public construction and these kind of entitlements, and more on basic social infrastructure that leads to productive growth, which is, again, education, research and development.
Professor Takanaka is former Minister for Economic and Fiscal Policy. What about this balance?
Well, important point is, well, between 2003 and 2007, the 4 years before the Lehman shock, as I mentioned already, during the 4 years, in these four years, the government deficit reduced amazingly. The deficit reduced from 28 deficit to 6 trillion yen deficit. This is amazing, without any tax increase. This is the basic pattern, how to realize the fiscal rehabilitation. We need some kind of cap, expenditure cap, especially cap for the expenditure of social welfare. At the same time, conquering deflation and making some new strategy for growth, the tax revenue should be increased. This is the only way to realize fiscal rehabilitation. Well, in about 10 years maybe, if the government takes this kind of policy, yeah, in 10 years, they can change the current situation. And tax increase is needed, I think, also. This, however, this tax increase part should be spent mostly for the younger generation's welfare. So also, this is not difficult. Already between 2003 and 2007, we created this kind of constructive process. Let's go back to that policy at that time.
But you're now a professor, and so many countries are now wrestling with exactly this problem, not just Japan, the balance between deficit reduction and fostering growth at a time of no growth. I come from a country, I come from a region where no government really knows what to do, but is hopeful that its policy is working. Do you believe there's a clear model and way ahead or not?
Well, very famous research is done by Professor Albert Aleshina of Harvard University. According to that, there is no magic way to realize fiscal rehabilitation. The only way is to cap the expenditures. At the same time, that they revive the economic growth. This is the only way. For many countries, for example, countries which took tax increase for the first stage of the rehabilitation, these are all are very not successful. This is a very simple, in a sense, case study, but very
it's
important.
Not proven, is it yet?
Oh, no. In many countries, Aleshina made a very empirical research for more than 100 countries. And this was already proved historically. This is the only way. If the government increase tax very hastily, this will bring about a worse economic situation, and fiscal rehabilitation will become much more difficult.
But do you believe the current situation allows those models, as you say, proven empirically,
Yep.
to still be applied? Because the variables now are in many ways rather different.
Well, variables are always different. Already in the past, variables are different. But still, political leadership was realized. For example, please look at the case of Greece. They are still against the placing a cap on expenditures. But that's definitely necessary. Without this cap on the expenditures, even if they increase taxes, that's meaningless.
But that's what the economists say. But when it comes down to hard politics, that's when it's difficult to
I
sell
used to
it.
be a politician.
Now you don't have to be elected.
The Prime Minister Koizumi said that and realized that. This is a leadership. This is a real leadership. Maybe you will have some kind of pain. However, beyond the pain, we can, get more prosperous society. This is the role of the leadership, role of the leaders, to say that way.
I noticed that the BBC website is describing Mr. Papandreou this morning as walking on a volcano or balancing on a volcano. Madam Kawaguchi.
Yes, it is a difficult issue. We struggled for the past 20 years, and then we have not, it's getting worse. And I was going to say, especially the recent 2 years, but I will not say this. But It is a difficult issue. My inclination is that I lean on the growth side than defense of the budget. If the Japanese companies are not investing in Japan, just open up completely, get anyone who would invest in Japan. Just remove regulations, reduce the government size so that we only do the basic things that the government should be doing, leave everything to the private sector to manage. We have to get people involved in this. Otherwise, they just look at the government and think that the government should be doing what it should be doing. So it's an emergency. And we need, as Takenaka-san was saying, we need political leadership that will talk to the people, that will show to the people what exactly in reality should be done. Thank you.
Another structural change in this leadership landscape, no name here, the Olympus scandal. How seriously should a government regard the importance of corporate transparency? What measures need to be taken in future to maintain confidence in the corporate system, particularly when life is getting difficult? Mr. Kitagami.
Well, you know, I think corporate governance is, of course, a big issue, but I don't see how much the government can really do. I mean, basic laws, the concerning governance of maybe the Kaisha law on corporations, but you know, Olympus has a lot to do with more of I think a corporate cultural aspect that they have to deal with. You know, they have to become more modernized in that
Right.
sense.
Well, Mr. Takanagi, you had to deal with the banks with a certain corporate culture there in your time. What is being revealed still after what you dealt with?
Well, corporate governance issue is a new and old problem for us. I do not have at this moment a very ideal solution, but the direction
But you
will be
accept
like
there's an
that.
issue. Do you accept there's an issue?
Okay, the direction of the reform will be like that. More independent policy, independent board members are necessary. Independent, keyword will be independent. We now have some outside or external board members, but they are not sometimes independent from, for example, the top leaders. So independent board member, the number of independent board members should be increased. This will be one important direction for the solution of the corporate governance system in Japan.
What, Mr. Kitagami, sorry?
I don't have no answer.
Go ahead.
Just quickly, I think we are moving to the right direction, and most of the companies do very well. I agree with the outside board members, and also there are some countries like Daiwo Seishi or Olympus that have problems, but it's good that these are coming out, and I think it goes down to the public to watch the stockholders that things like that will not happen. But that direction, I think we have moved, and it's good.
But is this part of the new thinking that has to occur in order to create the new model that we're trying to seek post 3/11?
We have been moving toward that direction. It's nothing new since the March 11th. We've been moving toward that. It's just that we have to speed up the movement. This increased transparency for the corporation has been with us for some time now. The deregulation has been with us for some time now. It's just that we need to move much faster, and it's the sense of urgency that we need to have with us.
Because one of the questions which keeps coming through here is about the confidence in political leadership again, and that being one of the issues about corporate governance and governance in general. All three of you. I have to keep putting that to you because it comes through time and time again in the questions.
Okay, I think this is going to be the last question.
Okay, sure.
Yeah, thank you.
I have one more question then.
One more question?
Which I will ask,
okay.
yeah.
Okay, the quick one.
Just one comment that I have is that we should change enlarge the constituency for the lower house and go back to the, medium-sized. in comparison to the present small constituency. If we keep this one, the politician will have to get more than 50% of each constituency, and thus they have to pay attention more. They do not have much time for abstract discussions which politicians need to have. Thank you.
And that's one of the questions, which is the last question, about whether there should be a reconfiguration of Parliament or not. Mr. Takanaka.
Well, I used to be a member of Upper House. I'd like to say Upper House is not needed. I'm very sorry for Kawaguchi-san. One chamber is enough, I think.
You would abolish it. You would abolish it, would you?
Excuse me?
You would abolish the Upper House.
Oh, yes. No. That's a very dangerous situation.
I just wanted to be
let's
clear.
unify two chambers. Let's unify two chambers. One chamber is enough. So, which should be abolished. I don't say anything about that. But anything, to simplify the decision-making process of the legislation is also needed. Yes, also the number of that members should be decreased. Yes, this must be a necessary reform, I think.
We can never unify the two houses because we have to change the constitution, and it's going to be, in reality, it's going to be so many years before we can change even one word of our constitution. We have to create a differing identity for each house.
Mr. Kitagami.
For the spirit of reform. But I agree that if it's possible, a unified Dai would be better. If not, then we should lessen the strengths of the upper house. According to most Westminster models, I think this is the norm. I think the Japanese upper house has much too much say in passing bills or budgets. So that's one reform that we should do. Again, I think governance is the basic problem, and one thing that I would mention is that the president of a party should have more control over the party members, and this is the biggest issue. Everyone talks about strengthening the prime minister's office. I think this is a secondary issue, because even if the prime minister is strong, if he can't control his own men in his own party, then you're not gonna wield that much influence. So, and the small election districts was aimed for that, because if you have a medium-sized or a large election constituency, then you're going to have 3 people coming out of the same party, which means factions have more influence, have more say. We'll choose Mr. A, candidate A. The faction, a different faction would say, we'll choose candidate B. And this is how the old LDP used to run its party. And by choosing only one member, one candidate that has more strength, more say for the presidency and the leadership of the party, which would have more control over the party members. So I think the small district is much more prone to a stronger management in the political party.
It says no minutes there, but I can't let the session end without this last question from Koji Alagoka. I hope I've got that correct. How can we raise the happiness rate in Japan?
Okay, very quick, thank you.
Well, I think the Japanese people should look at other countries. And be, I think they should realize how much of a good country that we have. We should, we should look at the level of the economy, the safety standards.
Okay.
I think that's the main thing that the Japanese people
Professor
should do.
Takanaka.
Freedom to choose or choice. Also, in that sense, deregulation is very important.
To have more, to go out to the streets to try to change by yourself if there is a need to change. Japan is a good country, it's a happy country. I think we should be proud of ourselves, but you have to be involved.
So we end on a higher note. Thank you for all your questions. We got through about 30 of them.